Hi everybody, this is Noelle from Petitti's, and spring, first day of spring, is the best time to work on your house plant tasks. If you have waited to repot, divide, transplant your cuttings, feed, now is the time to do it. It's the perfect time to do it. And the reason being is you wait for basically the first day of spring, or when you can start when we spring forward with the time, but it's because the day length is getting longer and longer and longer, and therefore your houseplants are picking up on that more light during the day. And so they're starting to perk up and they're ready to start actively growing through the growing season, okay? Coming out of their dormancy for fall and winter and moving into spring season. So that's why you really wanna work on your houseplants at this time of year. So let's talk about a couple of different things. We are gonna be repotting this pothos here, and I'll show you why, and we'll talk about that. We're also going to be potting up some of these cuttings of this goldfish plant, so that's really fun. And we'll talk about some fertilizers as well that we have over here. Now, to start out with, when do you know that it's time to repot your plants? And one of the things is when you lift up this plant and it feels like a rock inside the pot, which this one does, you can barely squeeze the pot. There's so many roots and they're so compacted inside this pot that it definitely needs to get transplanted into a larger pot. And when you transplant something into a larger pot, you're looking at not a huge transplant, so not into a 14-inch pot. We're going from a 4-inch into about a 6-inch, okay, with a little bit more depth. So that's a good transplant, 1 or 2 inches wider in diameter than what you started with, okay? The other thing that might be a good indication is that you're starting to see roots surface at the top of the pot as well. And you think, oh my gosh, what is happening here? You know, are they supposed to develop air roots? Well, not necessarily. With most plants, when the roots are coming up to the surface, again, that root base is taking up all the soil space, and it's coming up, of course, to get watered a little bit more. Another indication, a third indication that they need repotting is when you go to water this plant, you're trying to thoroughly moisten the soil, except the water is running straight through the plant. You can't keep enough moisture in this plant, and they end up becoming dried out very, very quickly. And we don't want that to happen. So sometimes your watering task is, you know, every couple days you continue to water this plant. Next thing you know, it gets slightly wilted again and you think, oh my gosh, what is going on? So those are really 3 good indications that it's time to go ahead and repot it into a larger size. Okay, now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna try to flex this pot a little bit and try to loosen the roots that are, I'm sure, wrapping around the inside here and around this root ball, okay? And then I'm just gonna tip it to the side and gently try to pull it out, and nothing, surprisingly, wow, and nothing came out of the bottom, which is surprising because normally when your plants need a little bit more space, they're gonna start moving out those drainage holes towards the bottom. Now look at that root system. It is very, very compacted. It's so hard that I can barely get my fingers in here. I can pull a little bit on the bottom roots, but it is all twisted inside there. And so there's a very, very little soil there. So what do you do? And Angelo often talks about this when you're renovating or rejuvenating your houseplants, is you wanna make sure that you go ahead and take 1 inch or 2 off the bottom of this root base, okay? And what that does is it will really get some of the oldest bottom roots off of this plant so it can start producing more. So we call this root pruning, and we do it with all different types of plants. And especially if we want them to grow better in pots, they can do that, and you can root prune, and it does benefit the plant in the long run. So that's the first thing we're gonna do, is take a little bit off. Now, if I take 2 inches off, I'll remove half of the root ball. So we're not going to remove half the root ball off of a 4-inch plant. So I'll probably take about 3/4 of an inch off the bottom here to loosen this up. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to score the roots all the way around. Just go ahead and cut down the sides, try to open that up, try to stop these roots from wrapping around this root ball, okay? And that will help, again, the plant produce more smaller fibrous roots here and reach out to the sides. I've mentioned this before in other videos. If you have roots, and this one really doesn't have any older bad roots here, but if you have roots on plants that are larger than the size of a pencil, okay, and they're yellow or brown or mushy, anything like that, you want to remove those, okay? That's on the way to decay and decomposing. You don't want that on your plant, okay? This one, the root system looks really pretty healthy. It's just really, really compacted. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and cut, and I just have some utility scissors here, and I sanitized these before we started with a little bit of hand sanitizer, or rubbing alcohol is fine. You can use that too. And I'm just going to cut into this root base, and you can see I'm going to go all the way around. I'm going to have a nice ring of older roots that I'm going to take off this bottom here. And once I do that, you can tell, ooh, yeah. Once I do that, then I'm going to take the scissors and I'm just going to cut up the sides of the plant and score it. Now, you don't have any scissors on hand, that's okay. You could just use a serrated knife, just be careful. You could use pruners. You could use just about anything that you can get in there and cut and make some scores in this root system. So that's what I'm doing. And I've made 4 now, 5 maybe. There we go. So see how I'm totally loosening that root ball up now, so I can actually spread out the sides and I'll be able to transplant it into its new pot. Okay, now pot selection, folks. I'm always going to tell you that I think pots that have drainage holes in the bottom and have a saucer attached to them is great, or drainage holes in the bottom and have a separate saucer, I think are awesome. They really do make a huge difference in how you can maintain your watering of these houseplants. If you put a houseplant in a pot without drainage holes, it's okay, but you want to make sure that you have some kind of drainage material like gravel or rocks or what have you down at the bottom of that pot, so that there is some place for that water to go, okay? The next thing that you want to be very careful with is watering those plants inside that pot. If you're never going to remove that plant out of the pot to water it, then what you've got to do is make sure that you're doing some very careful watering. You're not over watering that plant and it's not sitting in water. So your monitoring and watering of that plant is a little bit more difficult in that case. If you plant in pots with drainage holes and saucers, you'll be able to see the water come out, run through, even drip out of the saucer sometimes. So maybe over the sink, you want to go ahead and water and then go ahead and drip it out. But that's a really good way to go. So we've got a pot here with a drainage hole in the bottom. I got some soil in there already. And so what we're going to do is use a potting mix. Okay, so for your average foliage houseplants, a regular potting mix works very, very well. There's lots of different formulations of potting mixtures, okay? But average potting mix is good. What it usually is a mixture. It's called a soilless mixture. So it's usually a mixture of some peat, some perlite. Ours, Petitti potting mix actually has a lot of what we call pine fines in it. So it's a very, very fine pine in there, and it makes it nice and fluffy, but the pine fines also help hold a little moisture a little bit longer, okay? You might see some bark in some mixes, like orchid mixes. You might see some sand in mixes, like a succulent mix, okay? But your average potting mix should be fluffy and hold on to a little bit of moisture and then still well draining, okay, which this one is. Now, I pre-moisten this so it isn't super dry and super fluffy, because when I plant this new plant in its pot, I don't want it to kind of bubble up and flow over the side. So I did pre-moisten this with a little bit of water from the watering can. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is this plant is now a little bit shorter, a little less root in it. So I'm about 2 inches away from the bottom of this pot. So I'm going to fill the pot with a little bit of soil at the bottom so I can set the pothos right on top of it, okay? And I'm gonna give that soil a little bit of water and just lightly moisten this soil at the bottom. Okay, next, I'm gonna take this pothos, make sure that those roots are really spreading out, and I'm gonna place it in the pot. And it looks like it's right at the right level. And I'm looking for a little bit of a watering space from the top lift to the top of that root ball. So I want about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of watering space where when I go and water down into the soil and into the roots, I want to make sure that the water stays inside that pot, that again, it doesn't bubble over the side, okay? So this looks good. That's set just right where I want it. And now I'm just going to fill in around the edges with more of our potty mix. Making a little mess here, but that's what this is all about. Getting dirty and making your plants a little bit happier while you're doing it. And it is all planted here. The next thing that I want to do with this plant, of course, is I want to feed it. Because we are going into the growing season, the active growing season, so again, anywhere from like mid-March all the way to, let's say, September, October, like mid-October, the active growing season, that's when you want to feed your foliage houseplants, okay? So that's wonderful. And all fertilizers are a little bit different just depending on what you want to use. If you want to use a liquid concentrate like a Spoma Indoor, that's fine, no problem. As directed, you use a cap full in a quart of water, and then you typically use it once a month. They say 2 to 4 weeks, once every 2 to 4 weeks. So you could do that. But typically once a month is really all that houseplants need as far as fertilization, because they're not in ideal growing environments. They don't need a lot of nutrition to keep going, just to keep them green, looking nice, and we don't need them to explode out of their pots. We just planted them in their new home here, so we don't necessarily need them to grow like gangbusters around. So you could use something like the liquid concentrate. Jax right here, Jax is a synthetic houseplant food, and they do have a houseplant formulation. Jax is going to be that dry powder, if you will, and then you're going to go ahead and add that to water and go ahead and feed your houseplants as directed. Again, it's usually about once a month. Plant food spikes. If you still do spikes, that's okay too. There's still plant food spikes available. You have to change them out usually every couple months or so, but just keep an eye on that so you're continuing to feed your houseplants when they're actively growing. Or I think it's really easy to use a pelletized fertilizer like Osmocote. The pink cap formulation is great for indoor plants, and I'm going to tell you, one application for this plant is all you need. So basically with the pink cap, I'm going to go in and do probably about a 1/2 tablespoon and go ahead and just sprinkle around the edge of the plant. Okay. Now, when I'm done sprinkling this around, what I'm going to do is just try to work it in a little bit. It works the best when it's in the top 1 to 3 inches of soil. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to work it in a little bit with my fingers all the way around. And then the last thing to do when you're repotting, of course, is water. I'm going to put the potting mix down there. Now, because I'm not near a sink, I'm going to water carefully right now and try to thoroughly moisten the soil substrate all the way around. And we're gonna watch for it to come out the bottom. And if it doesn't come out the bottom, we will repeat that one, okay? So let's set that aside for a little bit. And there's my mess. And then the next project we're gonna do is, of course, planting up the goldfish starters, okay? So goldfish, if you didn't know, you can take cuttings and set the cuttings in water, and they root from every point where there are leaves, okay? So you just remove the leaves off the bottom of the branches and voila, you'll have roots there, okay? So we're gonna plant these up in a little terracotta pot here, about 4 inches wide in diameter. And the same thing, I'm gonna fill this terracotta pot with pre-moistened potting mix. Same thing, the goldfish don't need any special potting mixture. They just need potting mix to do well. And I'm gonna tamp this down so I have that water space at the top. So you can look, I have about a 1/2 inch of water space when we go in and water that plant, okay? I can do a little bit of Osmocote. On a 4-inch pot, it's like 1/4 tablespoon. I'm gonna just sprinkle that across the top, and I'll go ahead and work that in a little bit. And the next thing we need is like a dibbler, or I'm just gonna use my scissors and use one of the blades to make holes that I can put these rooted stems in, okay? So I'm gonna make a hole, take a rooted stem, and just go ahead and place that right in there. Tamp around it, make a hole, take a rooted stem, and just tamp it right in. One thing that I forgot to mention is make sure before you are transplanting, and it doesn't matter if you're potting up a size like we did with the pothos or we're transplanting these cuttings, is make sure that the plants are well hydrated. Obviously the goldfish plant is, because it's been rooting in water, so there's plenty of hydration there. But before you're potting up your plants, make sure they do have a good drink of water. They're nicely hydrated so that they will continue to stay moist as they're trying to re-root back in that new soil. Your goldfish plants and your pothos, you know, medium indirect light is great. Goldfish could take a little bit more if you wanted to put them in bright light. That's fine too. They'll do their thing for you. They're really pretty easy. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna add just a little bit more soil around the top, because I've kind of pushed the soil level down a bit as I was planting around the starters. We have our fertilizer in there. We have our cuttings in there. And then we'll water a little bit. Try to moisten that top level. Also, a reminder to take care of houseplants that have really nice thick foliage. You're gonna wanna make sure that you take a soft sponge or a soft dishcloth, go ahead and clean off the dust, give them a nice little sponge bath. You can take them into the bathroom or the shower, you know, spray them off really nice. When they're dry, you can use something like leaf shine if you want to on some of the thicker, waxy plants. They can tolerate leaf shine. Things like pothos will do great with leaf shine. Don't use it on your ferns or anything that has real thin foliage, but the thicker plants look gorgeous with leaf shine. Make sure you use it when they're hydrated and they've been fully watered, and then go ahead and spray it on, and they look lovely. They look so pretty, clean, ready to go for spring. Enjoy.